Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 2 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 26, Plans and Changes. Report. Magneto said from his throne, and Techmage looked up at him. Almost done, sir. I've tested the alterations to the program and we will be ready to launch within 2 days. Excellent. Magneto said quietly as he leaned back on his throne. Chrome, report. We have found the lab that you wished us to locate and are keeping it under surveillance. Chrome said, then he paused. Sir, I must ask. Assuming that your plan works. Never assume. Magneto said. That is why, when I deploy, Bizarro will be by my side and Quicksilver will be nearby. If the plan works, all that I will have lost is some time as the lab is set up somewhere new. If it fails, which it might judging from what happened at Genosha, then we will have a secure fallback plan. Always prepare for things going wrong, Chrome. Most of the time, it will be unneeded, but there will be times when a backup plan will save you from disaster. Yes, my lord. Chrome said with a bow. I understand. Scott's eyebrows shot up as Xavier entered the room and the bald professor chuckled. Yes, Scott, this is one of the chairs we used during our first meeting at the fortress. Clark was kind enough to modify it with a power cell, controls, armrests, and footrests for me. You have a hover chair? Scott managed and Xavier nodded. I have been considering one for quite some time. I even tried to use the danger room to draw up plans for one last year, but I ended up with something that looked like a pair of yellow shoe boxes attached at 45 degrees. Clark, Forge and Peter put this together for me in under an hour. Since now that Clark has been revealed as Superman, there is less need for secrecy. Nice. Scott said, walking round to examine the chair from all angles. The chair itself looked like it was made from a single curved piece of metal with several lines of glowing crystals running down parallel to each other. The armrests emerged seamlessly from the sides of the backrest, while the footrests were supported by a single angled strut which emerged from the base of the floating chair. Embedded in the base of the chair was a thick crystalline disc that looked almost 10 centimeters thick and which Scott suspected supported the entire thing. It also has a remote link to Cerebro, although I need to land before I can use it. Xavier added. While it isn't anywhere near as powerful as it would be if I was actually in Cerebro, I can see several ways that it could prove useful. Heh, I guess that means that they've upgraded you again. Scott joked and Xavier paused as he thought about it before nodding. Yes, I believe that they have. Sir, where are we? Trask asked as they emerged into a cavernous factory humming with energy. Creed gave him a slight smile. I always believe in having a backup plan, Bolivar. When you created the basic types of Sentinels, you also designed another and even had the largest crystal programmed ready for if you should ever choose to build it. Trask nodded, unsure about where Creed was going with his comments. Then they rounded a large piece of machinery and he inhaled sharply. Sat in a giant throne which was set against the back wall was a sentinel almost 30 feet tall. Its lines were smooth and flowing, the sculpting of its torso armor giving the impression of a sleeveless tunic, while the head had been shaped to give the impression of a Roman-style helmet with an emotionless face. A veritable fan of conduits, cables and pipes were connected to its back, giving it the impression of wings. If you recall, I reassigned the White Bishop after you got the assembly lines sorted. Creed said as the aforementioned cyborg walked into view. This was his assignment, Master Mold. The ultimate sentinel, with the ability to repurpose any modern factory, rearranging it so that it can create new sentinels to protect humanity. Master Mold, state your primary directives. The looming figure moved slightly, its purple optics swiveling in their recesses to focus upon them. Primary Directive 1, protect humanity from the threat of mutants. Primary Directive 2, deploy Sentinel forces for the good of humanity. Primary Directive 3, oversee maintenance and construction of Sentinel forces. Primary Directive 4, analyze mutant powers and develop countermeasures. Trask stared at the metal giant, then he started to grin. We may win this yet, especially if we can reclaim the Sentinels we have lost. Oh. The Sentinels that Magneto stole from us are gone, barring a full reprogramming. Creed said, then he smirked. But Master Mold is receiving all the data from them regardless. Soon, we will know Magneto's plans, as well as the identities and locations of his allies. Trask's grin turned feral. What a day. Ray sighed as he staggered to the chair and slumped into it, earning a few glances from the others who were doing homework in the library. Callisto finally made her decision, and I've been helping the Morlocks move to Sanctuary, along with another group they were in contact with, a group living in an area known as the Labyrinth. And we were grateful for your help. A voice rumbled from the door. Several students gasped as the owner of the voice walked in and looked round. The winged cat is Talon, Ray said without bothering to look round. He's joining the X-Men. His girlfriend Maggie and their friend Claw are moving to Sanctuary as its guardians. Viho, Kurt said, moving closer to the tall being. That is one heck of a mutation. Not the same as yours. Talon shrugged, pulling his wings closer to his body. I'm the result of a genetic experiment. I used to be human before the now thankfully deceased Dr. Severius used me and a few others in an attempt to create artificial gargoyles. He did something to mix panther, bat, and electric eel DNA to create this form. Superman told us he can turn us back human with his medical tech, but we're sort of used to this form now. Except for Fang, he was abusing his power, so Superman returned him to his former self. Talon can fire electrical blasts too, Ray noted. Nowhere near my level, but he can taser people in close combat. Another flight type, Storm noted as she placed a bookmark in the novel she was reading and set it to one side. Rising from her seat, she walked over and fearlessly offered her hand. I am Aurora Monroe, also called Storm. Welcome to the X-Men. Thank you. Talon smiled. It is good to know you are well, my friend. Another voice rumbled and Talon looked up as Goliath stepped out of one of the alcoves, his wings wrapped around him and a book clasped in his claws. Eliza was worried about you. Do you mind if I tell her you are here? Not at all. Talon said. I didn't know that you lived here too. I do not. I am just visiting. Goliath shrugged, holding up the book in his hand. Talon tilted his head slightly. The Sword and the Staff by Jeffrey Robbins. He read. I heard about that book, is it accurate? As I have never met Merlin, I cannot answer. Goliath shrugged. Perhaps you should seek out Arthur Pendragon, for he may be able to answer your questions. Whoa, whoa. Ronnie interrupted. Arthur Pendragon? King Arthur's alive. I met him on Avalon. Goliath said, and Ronnie's already wide eyes somehow grew larger. Avalon actually exists. Lord Magneto. Chrome shouted excitedly. Techmage reports success, it is done. Excellent. Magneto purred as he rose from behind his desk and strode towards the door, his cape flaring dramatically. Stepping out of the office, he paused as his gaze traveled across the Sentinels, then he turned to face his chief lieutenant. Did you do that? Yes, my lord. Chrome stated proudly, looking at the lines of Sentinels with their armor plates outlined in deep purple and a stylized representation of Magneto's helmet in red on their shoulders and the left side of their chests. I like it. Magneto said after a long moment of contemplation. Chrome smirked slightly, then turned to face Magneto, letting Magneto's gaze drift to the similar insignia located above his heart, a red helmet in a silver circle. Xavier has his circled X, Superman has his diamond S, the Avengers their circled A, we needed an icon to mark our own as well. Chrome explained. Since it is you, my lord, who is the one we all look up to, it must be you who inspires the icon that we use, and since your helmet is so recognizable. I agree. Magneto said with a smile. You have my approval, but don't go overboard with it. I do not want to end up with an evil lair look with my new icon plastered 5 meters high between pillars and on banners descending from the ceiling. I saw too much of that when I was young. Chrome froze for a moment, his suddenly expressionless face reflecting his realization. Of course, my lord. He managed, and Magneto nodded. Excellent, Chrome. I knew that you would understand. Chrome bowed as Magneto walked away, then he slumped slightly. I almost failed him. What are you talking about? Techmage asked as he approached, wiping his hands, and Chrome glanced round before answering. When Lord Magneto was but a young boy, Europe was rent by war, a war sparked by a madman who believed in the purity of a race that he himself was not part of. Lord Magneto's family was slain by the people who followed that madman, and Lord Magneto himself, once his powers activated, was taken and experimented upon until the day that he was rescued by Steve Rogers and Logan. Captain America and Wolverine? Tech-Midge asked, receiving a nod in return. Indeed. Both far beyond human in their own ways, just like Lord Magneto. Once the war ended, Lord Magneto searched for a way of promoting peace, eventually meeting Charles Xavier. The two were great friends, but their differing experiences led to their eventual parting of ways. Xavier foolishly believed that the humans would choose to live peacefully with those who were their superiors, whilst Lord Magneto knew that humans would seek to wipe out our kind because we are different, we are superior, and they fear us because of it. And why did you almost fail? Tech-Midge queried. Because I almost took us down the path of grandiose display that the madman from his youth embraced. The madman, Adolf Hitler, used such displays to seize power, to reinforce his insane desire to control everything. Lord Magneto merely wishes for our kind to take our rightful place as leaders, a place without fear, without human oppression preventing us from living our lives as we should. Tech-Midge nodded slowly in understanding, then he placed a reassuring hand on Chrome's shoulder. But you didn't fail him, he said gently. And that is what counts. For several seconds, both men remained unmoving, then Chrome slowly nodded. Thank you. No problem, big guy. Tech-Midge said with a slight smile. Now come on, let's get these things as close to perfect for Magneto's plan. Of course. Chrome said, then he paused. Thank you. Sir, a message from our agent in Magneto's organization. Nick Fury looked up from the eternal flow of paperwork and e-forms that he dealt with on a daily basis, a Sisyphean task which he hadn't signed up for, a task that he would take any excuse to avoid, even dealing with Tony Stark's drunken misadventures which, as aggravating as they might be, were less so than the bureaucratic nightmare he was faced with. Reaching out, he accepted the datapad and quickly scanned it, then he froze and reread it, hoping against all hope that he had been wrong. He wasn't. Status on the Avengers. Currently on a mission to Asgard, dealing with an issue with Amora and Scourge. And the Commandos. Taking down a necromancer in Brazil. Damn it! Fury shouted. Just when? Xavier. Get me Xavier on the comm, now. Yes sir. And get ready to start evacuating Washington. Yes sir. Chapter 27, Thread Ascending. Bizarro, it is time. Magneto announced, and the gray-skinned clone looked up. Bizarro smash big metal enemies. No, Bizarro smash city and soldiers. Magneto replied, and the clone grinned. Bizarro like smash. Then come and I will tell you when to smash. Bizarro grinned and dropped the mangled piece of metal that he had been toying with. Superman dropped onto the lawn in front of the White House at high speed, drawing a brief burst of gunfire before shouts to stand down caught up with the protective reflexes of the guard force. Unslinging the carrier pod on his back, he looked round at the captain running towards him. Superman, Fury told us to expect you. I have a door here that you can use to get the president out once my reinforcements come through. Clark said as he opened the container to reveal a stone rectangle suspended in a web of cords and cables. Fury should have cleared it. The captain opened his mouth, then paused as his radio beeped at him. Raising one hand to his ear, he listened, then turned pale. Giving the dawn skies a nervous glance, he turned back to where Superman was waiting patiently. See, confirmed. He stuttered before collecting himself. Can you get the president to safety? In answer, Clark tapped a control on the side of the pod, and an instant later, Nick Fury strode through. All right soldier, reinforcements are coming, now let's get the president to sanctuary as fast and quietly as possible. Even as he spoke, Cyclops, Wolverine and Havoc piled through, followed by Maggie, Ororo, Claw, and Talon. The others are on their way. Cyclops said as all except Logan and Cyclops took to the skies. Mystique said that she'd bring the Brotherhood. Beefcake Man. A voice shouted, and Clark managed not to sigh as Squirrel Girl hugged him. The defenders are here. We'll help out. Henshin Rangers coming through, Superman Dono. Another voice stated, and Superman raised an eyebrow at the newest figure in their ranks. And you are? He's the Silver Samurai. Logan answered, his gaze fixed on the armored figure. I've gone up against him a few times. And it will be an honor to fight alongside you in this upcoming battle. The armored figure replied, then he removed his helmet and bowed deeply to Superman, extending his sheathed blade as he did so. My name is Harada Kanuakayo, Superman Dono. My blade is yours to command. Logan whistled, and Clark, recognizing that Kanuakayo had effectively sworn an oath, reached out and lightly placed his fingertips on the scabbard of the proffered sword. Then I command you to take your blade and strike with honor to defeat our enemies. Kanuakayo bowed again before replacing his sword in his belt and donning his helmet once more. May our enemies tremble before our righteous blows. Well said. A voice rumbled, and everyone looked round to see Juggernaut step forwards. My bro asked for my help. What's the emergency? Magneto got his hands on a secret Sentinel factory. Superman said calmly, ignoring the sudden chorus of exclamations and curses. We don't know which direction he's attacking from, but we know that he's going to lead the Sentinel army here in order to try and seize control. Before Superman could continue, a group of highly nervous, heavily armed Secret Service agents approached, surrounding a very familiar suited man, and Superman bowed slightly. Mr. President, it is an honor to meet you. Superman. Came the relieved reply. I was told that there was a threat and you had a way of getting me to safety. This, despite how it looks, is a door. Superman said, indicating the slab in the pod. Professor Xavier is waiting on the other side to guide you, and there are a variety of locations you can go to. One of the agents slid through the door and a moment later, stuck his head back through. No hostile activity, we can move. Wah. A blue-skinned figure popped through past the surprised agent, and Clark smiled. Mystique, what is it? I had to send the Brotherhood through to the Baxter building. The Fantastic Four were under attack by a group of acolytes. What? Clark asked in shock. I was told he is attacking here. He is. A commanding voice said, and Nick Fury stepped round. Mr. President, my agents have secured a safe location for you in the Xavier Institute. It has the best defenses I have ever seen. Mystique, can you take the President's form? Clark suddenly asked with a slight smile. If Magneto sees the President in one of the windows, he'll think he is still here. Brilliant. Fury agreed as Mystique frowned. I'll need help escaping. Kurt. Clark shouted, and Nightcrawler ran up. J.A. You're with Mystique. She's acting as our decoy and will need help escaping. J.A. Kurt nodded. Got it. She'll be safe with me. Mystique smiled. Mr. President, if you will come with me? Fury asked. Magneto smirked as the landscape unrolled below him. Slightly adjusting his stance on the Centurion's shoulder, he glanced down, seeing a distant blur of bluish silver that was his sun. A glance to his left ensured that Bizarro was still in position, while his senses told him the location of every single one of the armada of Sentinels following in a mass that darkened the skies. Soon. He murmured to himself. Soon, we mutants will take our rightful place and there shall be no more violence against us. Superman, we have already evacuated all non-combatants within 1 mile of the White House and are increasing the clear zone. Superman nodded. He had already cleared a couple of blockages himself before someone had pointed out that, as the most respected of the powered there, he was the de facto leader and should provide oversight and direction. Is Mystique ready? Decoy Group reports that they are in position. Another soldier reported, one hand cupped over his earpiece. Incoming Sentinels have been located, estimated time of arrival, 20 minutes. Keep the evacuation going as long as possible. Superman said calmly, then he activated his COMM. All personnel, this is Superman. Magneto's forces have been detected. Keep aiding with the evacuation, but in 10 minutes, I want the non-flyers to return to the White House to take up defensive positions. In 15 minutes, the flyers will do likewise. Superman out. Sinister looked up at the screen in the corner of the lab and his eyebrows lifted in amused respect. Eric, You managed to seize control of the things designed to be used against you and are trying to take over the country? How ambitious of you! An alarm interrupted his musings and he found himself being blown across the lab as the wall behind him exploded. Ignoring the deep lacerations covering him, his hand lashed out in his button, causing the cloning tubes to suddenly glow bright before they cracked, steam issuing from the gaps. Take him down before he does anything else. Sinister rose, ready to run, but a wave of force engulfed him, followed by several blasts of energy. Once the dust had settled, all that remained were a few small, steaming pools of blue blood partially covered by the wreckage of the wall Sinister had been slammed into. Report. The clones are cooked, sir. Techmage grimaced, then he turned and grinned. But the computers are still intact, including the memory banks. Give me a few minutes and I'll be able to upload all the data, allowing us to take the equipment without losing anything important. Then start uploading, that we may complete our task. Chrome commanded. Contact. Incoming from the southwest. Superman lifted into the air and smoothly ascended to join the flyers. Looking round, he raised an eyebrow. Quite a few more here than I thought. We had some freelancers and patriots join us. Talon said in explanation and Superman nodded. We need to force the robots down to the ground so that our allies can target them. I'll strike first and, what the? Bizarro smash. The incoming figure roared and Superman cursed as he flew forwards to intercept. Everyone get clear. You can't handle him. All the flyers backed away as the two figures collided, the shockwave of their impact almost knocking several others out of the skies. Magneto smirked as his minion effectively took the greatest threat to his plans out of the fight, then he looked down and his smirk turned into a frown at the sight of those waiting for him. Juggernaut. Colossus. Wolverine. Perhaps I should have brought a few more of my acolytes with me. A cloud of dust marked the formation of a crater where the Kryptonian and the clone had crashed, then the sun seemed to darken by comparison to the waves of energy which rose towards him. Summoning his shield, Magneto growled as the first sentinel fell in a cloud of vaporized metal, followed quickly by over a dozen more. Return fire and kill the traitors to mutant kind. In one perfectly synchronized move, the sentinels all lifted their arms and opened fire, sending a veritable rain of death towards the figures below. Shit. Alex cursed as he tried to pump as much energy, both from his own body and from his external reserves, into his shield, expanding it as much as he could without sacrificing the protection it offered. Screams of pain and anguish around him indicated that many of those who had assembled were if not mortally wounded, at least severely injured. Then the roaring of turbines announced the landing of the first wave of giant robots. Oh hell! Alex whispered as he tried to get feeling back into his left arm. This is so gonna suck. Yayarg! Frenzy howled as a combined punch from the blob and the thing catapulted her out of the window. Rather than watch her tumble out of sight, both combatants turned to engage other adversaries even as one of the walls collapsed, pinning another of Magneto's acolytes. They're trying to capture Susan. Reed Richards realized as he backhanded another attacker into the wall. Hell no! Toad shouted as he leapt into the air and landed on a female acolyte's back, driving her into the ground and knocking her out. No way! You're Superman's friends and we don't let Soup's friends get caught by bad guys. Yeah, like you have a. One of the attackers said before another acolyte, thrown by the thing, knocked him off his feet and into a wall, leaving a dent. Reed. Susan screamed as a wave of mist passed over her, then it dispersed and she was gone. Where is she? Reed shouted and the acolyte he was holding chuckled. Like we'd tell you, hero. He's got a point. Lance said, ambling across and spinning a knife between his fingers. You are a hero and thus can't torture him. I, on the other hand, once worked for Magneto. I was trained by Mystique, I studied under Sabretooth. As Lance spoke, the acolyte turned pale and started to sweat, then he gulped as Lance placed the blade of the knife against his groin. Now, I believe that you wanted to sing very high-pitched, yes? Or you can tell us where you are taking Susan. Your choice, but if you don't tell us, I'll get another pair of trophies for my wall. 5, 4, 3. Latveria. The acolyte screamed. Doom wants her in Latveria. Now that wasn't too hard. Lance smiled as Ben clumped over and knocked their prisoner out. Thank God I used to be a bit of a bad boy, it really helps with bluffs like that. Do you want to come along? Ben asked. We can probably squeeze you into the Fantasticar. Actually, I was upgrading one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Quinjets in the lower hangar. Reed countered. We can take that, it's almost as fast and we won't have to squash into various cockpits. Cool, can I fly? Toad asked, only to be given disbelieving looks by his teammates. You crashed last time. I've been practicing. Chapter 28, of Power and Hate. Rogue swore as a plasma burst nearly took off her head. Wishing that she had copied Scott's power instead of Piotr's, she dashed forwards and delivered a powerful strike at the knee joint of the sentinel that had almost killed her, hoping to topple it. However, her punch only dented it and it took an unsteady step back, its weapon-laden arm swinging down to point at her. Oh, she snicked. The arm crashed into the ground as a familiar figure swarmed up it and decapitated it before backflipping off the now toppling robot. These things are tougher than before. Rogue noted and Logan nodded. They still have weaknesses. Logan pointed out and Anna nodded as she took several deep breaths. You can do this. I can do this. That's the spirit. Logan grinned. Come on. Kanuakayo spun and wove through the ranks of the giant metal men, his blade licking out in precisely delineated arcs which sliced through alloy legs and arms with equal ease. The same power that infused his sword, giving it its sharpness, also infused his armor, protecting him from errant plasma and kinetic rounds. A flash of color caught his eye and his gaze settled on a larger model, one that looked more human-like rather than the normal skeletal forms. At last. He mused with a faint smile as he prepared himself. A challenge. Magneto smirked as he saw the president looking out of one of the upstairs windows before an agent hustled him to one side. Levitating, he pointed. Open that window for me. A quick salvo of plasma reduced the window to vapor and Magneto flew into the room. Surprise. Eric had just enough time to recognize the giant armored figure waiting for him before a swung fist launched him out of the building at a far higher speed than he had entered. You pissed me off. Who am I? I'm the Juggernaut. The figure shouted, launching itself at the blue and purple robot that had blasted the window open and slamming it to the ground. Magneto watched in dismay as the Decurion was literally ripped apart, then he saw the president briefly at the other end of the White House. I have you now. He snarled as he moved forwards, only to be knocked away by a metal fist. Colossus, I shall. He began, then he stopped as he realized that his opponent was a teenage girl. Ilyana. Tha nam's Anna, but ya can call me Rogue. The girl growled, punching him again and Magneto pulsed his power to send her flying, then he frowned. Why in blazes is her name so familiar? He mused, then he saw the president, at a third location. How is he moving so fast? A roaring noise interrupted him and his eyes widened as a riderless motorbike used the wreckage of a fallen sentinel to launch itself at him. Even as he gathered his will to deflect the bike away, it seemed to twist, the wheels moving to show that it was a person in an armored outfit. Magneto froze for an instant, just long enough to receive a punch that spun him round in the air, then the man was gone, the wheels returning to their bike position. What was that? A distraction. A new voice snarled and Magneto found himself being attacked by a tunic-wearing winged panther with electricity wreathing its claws. What is going on? Superman grunted as Bizarro delivered a cross-punch that almost caused him to fall over. Pulling on his experiences sparring with Logan, he used the impact to spin, delivering a powerful sweeping kick straight into his adversary's stomach. You heard Bizarro. Bizarro smash you. The enraged being lunged forwards. Just in time to meet a powerful uppercut that hurled him into the air. Crouching, Superman launched himself after the dwindling figure, rising above him and then flying straight down, slamming into him and smashing him into the ground. Staggering back, he turned away from the crater, then froze as a grating voice spoke. Bizarro not finished? Bizarro strongest. Turning, Clark found himself being slammed backwards by his opponent. Glancing behind him, he realized that they were heading for the Lincoln Memorial. Rather than try to oppose his enemy, Superman instead grabbed him and used his own flight powers to redirect them into the reflecting pool, and they vanished in an explosion of spray. Left flank. Scott shouted as he unleashed a rapid barrage of blasts. Alex nodded and concentrated his fire, buying their allies on that side enough time to regroup and regain their momentum. "How do you keep track of all this?" he shouted back, unleashing an attack that vaporized the lower torso of an attacking sentinel. "Training and an advanced HUD in my visor," Scott shouted back, unleashing a beam that sliced through a trio of robots that were moving to kill a group of injured men. "It lets me keep track of who is where and what their status is, amongst other things." "Cool." Alex laughed, activating his shield just in time to deflect a plasma barrage. Kitty popped out through the wall and grabbed one of the injured soldiers, pulling him into the White House for the medics to treat. As she prepared to return to the battlefield, she felt a hand tap her leg. "You a mutant?" the injured soldier asked, and Kitty nodded. "Thanks. I wasn't sure about you lot, but now you'll have my support, for what it's worth." Kitty grinned, then dived through the wall. Peter leapt out of the way of a plasma blast, his arm stretching in a move that sent webbing straight into the optics of the sentinel that had fired on him. Bouncing off another sentinel, he used his webs to swing round, tangling the two robots together before leaping away to find another target. The window shattered as Magneto hurtled through it just in time to see Nightcrawler grab the president and vanish in a cloud of smoke. An instant later, several soldiers piled into the room, pointing their bayonet rifles at him. "You are ordered to stand down and surrender peacefully. You Homo sapiens and your guns." Magneto sneered, twitching his fingers and crushing the firing mechanisms of the rifles. Several of the soldiers lunged at him, but he took control of the rifles and jolted them backwards, catching them in their faces and knocking all but one of them out before he levitated himself out of the window again. "Now, why did that teleporter look so damned familiar?" he muttered to himself. Then he saw the president at another window. With a wave of his hand, he sent a severed sentinel arm towards the window, only to see the president vanish in another cloud of smoke. "Why have they not simply run away?" he mused, absently reinforcing his shield to deflect an energy blast. "It's almost as if they are taunting me." His eyes widened in realization and he spun round, hurling a barrage of scrap at the window that the president had just appeared at. This time, the teleporter wasn't able to reach him in time and Magneto touched down in front of the restrained man. "I know that you are not the president. Where is he and who are you?" Jean screamed in pain as her leg snapped under the impact of her landing, even as she tried to roll to avoid the debris blasted into the air by the explosion that had sent her on her ill-fated flight. Rolling over, her eyes widened as a sentinel stood over her, its gun pointing at her. She could see all the way up its barrel to the glow of the plasma bolt that was about to clang. The sentinel was catapulted away by a semi-transparent fist that looked like it was made from light reflected from a robot. Jean's shocked gaze darted to the new figure and settled on the person hovering inside the giant's upper torso. Armor. The Japanese mutant clad in glowing technology didn't seem to hear her as she took a step forwards, the projected armor that gave her the code name moving in parallel as she picked up speed, heading towards one of the blue and purple robots. Plasma blasts bounced off her and then she was smashing through the sentinels, fists and feet being used as weapons. "Come on, we need to get you to cover." Jean looked round and saw a young soldier pulling a medkit. "I'll put a temporary splint on your leg, then we need to get back." Jean nodded and accepted the knife scabbard. Biting down on it, she tried not to scream as the soldier started to immobilize her broken limb. Clark's thundering haymaker sent Bizarro skipping across the surface of the water. Launching himself, he flew after the clone and grabbed him with one hand, punching him in the face with the other. "Why won't you stay down?" Bizarro managed to grab his fist and glared at him before exhaling sharply, sending a stream of fire at him. Clark simply let the flames slide off him before delivering a punch that smashed Bizarro into the ground. Standing above the knocked-out clone, Superman breathed a sigh of relief. "Finally," he said, then he looked down at his damaged uniform. "Ah, heck. I look worse than I did after that squirrel avalanche. Now what do I do with you? If I leave you alone, you'll just wake up and cause more, wake up, the stasis pods." Interesting question, Eric. The person imitating the president replied, and Eric's eyes widened in horrified realization. Mystique. The man in front of him seemed to flow and shift slightly until his one-time lieutenant looked back at him, her yellow eyes defiant. It's been a while. Traitor. Magneto ground out. Tell me where the president is and I'll grant you a quick death. Oh, you won't kill me, but I'll tell you anyway. Mystique sneered. He's safe at Xavier's Institute, where even your acolytes can't go. This whole thing was for nothing. Worse than that, in fact, you've exposed yourself and made an enemy of America. Magneto snarled and raised his hand, intending to kill the woman before him when something erupted from his chest and grabbed Mystique, taking her through the metal, imprisoning her and the wall behind it without leaving a mark. What? Thanks, Kitty. Mystique breathed in relief and the girl holding her grinned. No probs. Can't let Clark's squeeze get hurt, he'd be all mopey about it. Mystique started to laugh even as Kitty pulled her through another wall, away from the raging Magneto. Magneto used the metal around him to smash through the external wall of the White House, levitating high enough that he could see the battlefield, then he cursed. Most of the Sentinels he had brought with him were piles of scrap, torn, shredded, melted scrap. The others were still fighting, but the command units had obviously been targeted, and so the remaining Sentinels fought individually while the still active mutants teamed up and took them down one after another. Before he could do more than look at the battleground, a large nearly transparent hand slapped him out of the sky, skipping him across the grass. Sliding to a halt, Magneto pulled himself up to his knees, then his gaze rose to the burning Sentinel that was toppling towards him. Nuu! The Sentinel hit the ground and its power core exploded. Marco Kane grunted with effort as he threw the torso of the Sentinel he had, literally, disarmed, sending it into the back of another robot that was trying to get an angle that would allow it to fire past Havoc's shield. The teen gave him a quick nod of thanks and Juggernaut nodded back before striding forwards to find another target. All of the humanoid ones were long gone, and the skeletal ones were becoming easy targets. Superman! Scott shouted in relief as he cradled his burned arm against his torso. The blue and red blur destroying the few remaining robotic combatants paused briefly to grin at him, then resumed the airborne dance of destruction. Within a few more seconds, not a single Sentinel remained and Superman floated down to land in front of Scott. How are you? I'm okay. Scott said, then he winced as he accidentally moved his arm. Those things were trying to disable us or knock us out rather than outright killing us. It gave us a chance to fight back. Heck of a battle, though. Juggernaut rumbled as he walked up, his armor half melted and his helmet missing. Hope we don't go up against more of those things anytime soon. So do I. Superman said, looking round as groups of stretcher-carrying soldiers ran past. Looks like we took quite a few losses today. Superman. A girl shouted and everyone turned as Armor strode up and deactivated her power, her giant projected form dwindling until she was stood on solid ground. The suit works. Thank you. You're welcome. Superman said, then he started to rise into the air. I'm going to help as much as I can. We have wounded. We do. Scott agreed. They're setting up a medical tent over there, I'm heading over to get my arm seen to. Chapter 29, Refuge. Mr. President, welcome to the Xavier Institute for the Gifted. Charles Xavier said with a nod that verged on being a formal bow. Forgive me for not rising to greet you, but I took an injury to my lower spine when I was younger. I understand perfectly. Came the reply. That is an impressive chair you have. A gift from Superman. Xavier smiled. After the revelation that mutants existed and Clark's identity was outed, Clark offered to upgrade my normal chair to this one. It makes it a great deal easier to deal with things like stairs. S.H.I.E.L.D. is already using some of Superman's technology on our helicarrier. Fury interjected. The kryptonite reactor alone gives us more power than we know what to do with, even with the new energy shields and lift units installed. If you are hungry, then I am certain that Martha can whip up a meal for us. Charles offered and the president nodded. Is she good? I've tried to hire her for S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury admitted, earning a surprised look from the president. She's that good? Lead the way. Hey, Prof. Christopher chirped as Xavier entered the dining room. Grandma made cookies. Who are you? Mr. President, Nick Fury. These are Christopher Kent, Clark's adopted son, and Laura, Wolverine's daughter. Laura nodded in greeting as Chris bounced forwards and shook Fury's hand, then the president's. Pleased to meet ya. It's an honor to meet you. The president smiled at the young boy. Are you a Kryptonian too? Chris nodded. Yup, but I haven't got all the powers yet, only strength and toughness. Oh, I can see and hear really well, too. Why isn't Laura with the others at the White House? I remember reading about her combat potential. Fury asked and Xavier shrugged. We're still working on a way of immunizing her against a specific chemical compound called Killsent, a chemical that temporarily turns her into a killing machine. Chris can counter the effects when she enters that state and Laura knows it, which is why she has taken to remaining close to Chris and he close to her. Since Chris is too young to deploy. Fury nodded, then moved to one side as another boy entered. Hiya, Jamie. Chris grinned. Jamie, meet Nick Fury, Kara's boss, and the president, his boss. Jamie stared at the two men in shock, then his eyes rolled up and he collapsed with only Chris' fast reactions preventing him from hitting the floor. Jamie. And this is our library. Xavier said as he led the group in through the door. Over there doing her homework is Ileana, the younger sister of Piotr, and here we have May Parker. Fury smiled, walking forwards and taking her hand to kiss it. It has been quite a while. You never change, do you? May half scolded him while smiling. Still a flirt. The president raised a quizzical eyebrow at Fury, who coughed self-consciously into his fist. It is good to see you are doing well. You too. May twinkled, then she turned and curtsied. Mr. President, welcome to the Xavier Institute. Thank you. The president said. How do you know Director Fury? Well, May said, smirking at the suddenly panicked Nick, when he was younger, he thought himself a real ladies' man. Another sentinel detonated on the screen and the president frowned slightly. Whoever built those things didn't do a good job. Those things are falling like 10 pins. They seem to be holding back somewhat compared to Genosha. Xavier noted. I believe it is because they are mainly facing mutants and Magneto cares for mutant lives whereas he does not care about those without powers. The president whistled as a white-tinged almost transparent giant figure punched the head off a sentinel. Who is that? That is the young girl who was kidnapped by the so-called Friends of Humanity and used to attack New York a while back. She uses the code name Armor now and that is the first field test of her amplification suit. Impressive. Fury noted as he looked up from his computer tablet. K-Tech. Indeed. K-Tech. Kryptonian technology. That is correct, Mr. President. Xavier said with a slight nod. Clark has been slowly leaking bits of it into the public domain in order to accelerate humanity's technological progress without destabilizing society. It is mainly medical tech that he has been sharing since he holds the welfare of humanity as his highest priority. Interesting. The president nodded, then he glanced at the door past which Chris and Laura had walked by. Are those two training to become X-Men, was it? They're training to become members of Generation X. Xavier said, then he smiled and tapped a few controls on the arm of his hover chair. I don't know if you have heard of the move called the fastball special, but they have their own version. They did this yesterday. The screen changed to show Chris and Laura facing off against a large figure reminiscent of a sentinel. As they watched, Laura whispered something to Chris, who nodded and half-crouched with one hand extended. Laura hopped onto the outstretched hand and Chris took a step forwards, bringing his arm up in a throwing motion that hurled Laura into the air. Somersaulting with her claws extended, Laura plunged her fist claws into the robot's optics before the screen went black. Chris' super strength means that he can act as the launcher for that move. Xavier explained while the president tried not to laugh at the sight of a small boy throwing a teenaged girl who was half again his size. The joke is that it's a family move since Logan has been launched like that by Piotr, Kara, and Clark on different occasions. I see that they work well together. Fury noted. About that Killsent thing, would a gas mask or something like that work? Xavier froze for a moment, then he face-palmed. Why didn't we think of that? Clark's not the only one who'll dent the wall when they get back. Dent the wall. In joke. Xavier said in explanation as he tapped a control on his chair. Forge, are you there? Sure thing, Prof. What do you need? Someone just came up with a solution to the kill scent problem. Charles replied. A face mask. There was a long silence, then a series of muffled thuds sounded. Forge. I'm here. Forge groaned. A face mask. It's the powers problem all over again. Charles looked up and saw the curious expressions. When Clark, Peter and Forge were trying to find a way to artificially dampen mutant powers, they failed to examine the role that a mutant's biofield plays. After they examined some captured sentinels. Holy shit! The president whispered as he watched Magneto smashing through the walls of the White House. If I'd been there? Fury nodded, then he frowned as the news switched to the newest piece of footage, Magneto getting crushed by the falling sentinel. Xavier. I agree. Charles said. Fortress, replay the imagery that has just been displayed, cross-reference any other recorded viewpoints of the same event and highlight any anomalies. The screen went black for half a second before the footage replayed, only to pause just before the sentinel hit Magneto. On the screen, the sentinel was barely a centimeter away from Magneto, but a blue and silver blur was racing in from one side. In the next frame, Magneto had vanished and the blur, now with red and purple highlights, was moving out of the other side of the frame. Quicksilver. Xavier realized. What? Clark said from behind them, and all three men turned to see the Kryptonian looking at the screen. "Ah man, Magneto escaped. He's got more lives than a cat." Clark. Xavier said slowly, "What are you doing here?" "Putting someone into stasis." Clark said. From his Q&A, I'd say he was a clone of some description. He was strong, slightly stronger than me. Stopped me from taking on the Sentinels. He said he was called Bizarro. Looked a bit like me, but with gray skin, a bigger jaw and lanky hair. I managed to knock him out and brought him back here. Fury, good to see you, AGA. Mr. President. My apologies, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Understandable. The President said, rising from his chair and walking over to the gobsmacked Kryptonian. On behalf of all those you have saved, thank you. An honor, sir. Clark replied, then he glanced at the screen. If you'll excuse me, I'll head out and help finish up. In a blur, Clark vanished and all three men turned to watch the screen. A moment later, a blue blur started smashing through the remaining Sentinels and the President whistled. He's fast. He is. Xavier agreed. He can easily hit Mach 6 these days, and I think he said once that he hit Mach 9. Thank God he's on our side. Fury muttered, then he smiled slightly. The more I learn about him, the more I appreciate Kara being on the Avengers. The President nodded, then watched intently as the medics and soldiers started to swarm the field, collecting the injured. Thank God my family were elsewhere. He said. I think I'll have to give a speech about this. Pietro Maximoff slipped in through the barely open door, then turned to face the other occupant of the room. No sign of the freak clone, Pops. Looks like the Boy Scout won. That is rather annoying. Eric Lenshair said as he finished fastening his tie. Pausing to brush down his suit, he unhooked a trench coat and put it on. However, the secondary missions have gone without a hitch. Even as we speak, Susan Storm is being delivered to Victor Von Doom, thus guaranteeing us a safe refuge in Latveria where we can use the data and equipment we acquired from Sinister to rebuild our numbers. Pietro nodded and put on a pair of shades. So, we gonna head out? Indeed we are, my son. Eric smiled as he placed his hat on. Our private plane is waiting, and thanks to your perfect timing, all of our enemies believe that I am deceased. We now have all the time in the world. Incoming! Reed Richards shouted from the cockpit as he throttled back. Everyone hold tight and someone pop the aft ramp. As the plane slowed, Ben tapped the control and the ramp opened to allow a familiar blue-clad figure to swoop in. Superman! Johnny Storm half shouted as the ramp hissed closed. Great to have you. Good to be here. Clark smiled as he unslung the pod he was carrying and propped it against the side of the hold. I heard about Susan. Yeah, we tried, but there were too many of them with too many powers. Todd moaned. We KO'd about half before they got away. Clark nodded, then rummaged in the pod, pulling out a forearm-length metal rod which he handed to Todd. I heard a couple of weeks ago about your newly acquired staff skills, so I had Forge make you this. I keyed it to your biosignature. Just grip the two rough spots, place your thumb on the silver spot and pull your hands apart. Todd held the rod out in front of him and moved his hands apart. The rod reacted by extending to almost 6 feet long, and Todd laughed in delight. Once you've got used to that, I'll see about getting you an upgrade. Clark added as Todd tested the rod by collapsing it and extending it again. Whoa, this is so cool. Todd exulted. Hey guys, I got me a Superman upgrade. Nice. Fred admitted. Superman upgrade? Clark asked curiously, and Lance shrugged. It's what we call things like Scott's visor, Alex's gauntlets, Ray's power charge suit, things like that. These normal outfits you gave us are great, but they're kind of, not really optimized, if you get what I'm saying. Clark nodded. I do. However, some powers are harder than others to enhance. I'm not sure what I could do to increase your seismic skills, and Fred's invulnerability needs no help at all. I guess we're just that awesome. Lance grinned, then he sobered up. I'm glad you got here. We're going to need serious reinforcements if even half of what I heard about Doom is true. Clark smirked and patted the side of the pod as he opened it. ETA to Latverian airspace, 5 minutes. Reed shouted. Cool. Spider-Man said from where he was hanging from the ceiling, causing several of the passengers to jump in shock. Where the hell did you come from, Webhead? Johnny yelped, and Superman patted the side of the pod again. Susan Storm glared out of the transparent tube that she had been imprisoned in as a familiar green-cloaked armored figure rose from the throne that she had been placed in front of and walked towards her. Doom. She snarled. Susan, my dear, you look more lovely every day. Doom replied, reaching out to flatten a hand against the tube. That foolish man Reed does not appreciate you like I do. When I get out of here. Susan snarled, fingers twitching with the desire to use her powers, and Doom laughed. My dear Susan, that cylinder was designed to hold you. As I am certain you have discovered, using your powers in there is unwise. When you finally agree to become my wife, I will release you. Susan sneered at him, but deep inside she was hoping against all hope for a miracle. Chapter 30, Rescue. So there's one of the Asgard doors in the pod. Todd managed as Rogue appeared. Y'all got thought rot. Rogue said, then she held up her left arm to show the fingerless gauntlet. Forge finished 8. Your power glove. Superman nodded, then he caught the odd looks from the Brotherhood. You all know my sister's power lets her copy the powers of other mutants and even drain their life force. Well, the gauntlet she has on is something that still wasn't ready for the Sentinel assault. This will be the first field test of it. Which powers did you choose to load? Colossus, Logan, Kurt, and Scott. Metal body, healing, teleportation, and optic blast. Clark nodded as Rogue lightly stroked the 4 metal plagues that ran down the inside of the gauntlet. And I see you have blank modules for other powers so that we can duplicate the ones you copy and let you use them whenever. Only solo. Rogue sighed and Clark shrugged. Well, you have such a complex biofield that we can only give you a single power at a time. If you need multiple, you'll have to borrow them direct. Rogue grinned, then placed her hand on one of the plagues. A second later, her skin went from its normal color to metallic. I see it takes a few seconds to initialize. Clark noted as Rogue tapped the plaque again to return to normal. We'll have to work on that. It's funny. Rogue said, then she pushed back her hair to reveal a metallic band going around the back of her head and reaching to either side of her forehead. I'll show y'all this later, but I'll have an energy Vaser la Scott's, sorta. Given how Scott's power works, I can see why you'd need it. Clark said. Approaching Doom's castle, stealth systems are holding. Reed reported and Superman nodded. Even with stealth, we shouldn't go within a mile of that castle while in the air. I suggest we land near that outcropping and head in from there. He'll have traps. Reed noted and Superman nodded. But I have X-ray vision. And I have my spider sense. Peter added from his perch on the ceiling. Between Big Blue and myself, we'll do just fine. Ya realize, I never checked to see if I could borrow ya powers. Rogue noted. Perhaps once we get back, we can try. Sure. Peter shrugged as he flipped to the deck. Once we get Invisigeral back. Invisigeral. Ben chortled. Oh, Susie's gonna blast ya for that. Well, you don't need to tell her. Peter replied, then he glared at Johnny. What? Invisigeral. Johnny laughed. Oh, I gotta use that on Sis sometime. Beefcake Man. A new voice squealed and Superman closed his eyes in pain as a pair of arms encircled him. Hello Squirrel Girl. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doreen chittered, hugging Superman with a force that would have shattered a normal human's bones. I love the team you got me and the location is wonderful. I'm glad you like it. Superman said diplomatically. It's great. Doreen laughed, squeezing him again before letting go. I heard that you and Mystique are going to get married. We are. Clark said cautiously and Doreen squealed happily. That's wonderful. I love weddings, can I come? Sure. Clark managed, then he staggered backwards as Doreen glomped him. Why does he get all the chicks? Johnny complained humorously. Because he's Superman. Talon growled as he stepped out of the pod, his life mate Maggie close behind him. Claw will be here in a moment, we're going to provide air support for you. Superman nodded as a small jolt indicated that the plane had landed. I'll just get my reinforcements. Squirrel Girl added as she dived back into the pod. Superman stared at where she had been for a long moment. Why do I think that this is going to go strangely? All right, let's move out. Susan, my dear. Doom purred, are you ready yet to abandon that fool Richards and join with me, the true power of the world? You are nothing compared to Reed. Susan snapped back. He's 10 times the man you are. Susan, you wound me with your words. Doom chided. Still, there is no way that he can find you. Even if he did, I have adjusted my castle's defenses to counter the powers of your former teammates. What do you expect, that he will blast his way in here to rescue you? Before Susan could reply, the outer wall of the throne room seemed to explode and a red beam smashed into Doom, sending him flying into the opposite wall. Susan. Reed. Susan crowed in joy as a familiar figure leapt through the hole and started to run towards her, only to be blasted backwards. Reed. Mr. Fantastic bounced off the wall even as a red and blue figure somersaulted through the hole and began firing webbing at the Doombots that were flooding into the hall. A black-clad teenage girl with a pair of blades on each hand joined in, almost effortlessly carving the now-slowed Doombots into scrap metal while a fire-clad figure began melting those who were unimpaired. Who dares defy the will of Doom? Victor roared as he straightened, only for a blast of webbing to hit him in his face. Oh look, it's the son of Vader and the Leprechaun. Spider-Man quipped, earning a blast that he managed to avoid. Oh, Doomy's got mad. Die. Victor roared, having managed to pull the webbing off his mask, then he stumbled as the entire castle seemed to shake. What? Hey, lady. A new voice said and Susan's eyes widened as Fred Dukes lifted the cylinder she was trapped in. While they're having fun, let's get you out of here. A pair of Doombots turned, their guns extended, then a shape landed on them, crushing their heads with precise staff blows. Oh yeah. The Toad strikes from the shadows. I will not allow this travesty. Doom roared as he unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, only to be sent flying by a blur that had smashed its way through the Doombots around him. Superman. Doom. Superman replied calmly. You know why we are here. Susan's storm is mine. Victor raged, then his gaze fell on the empty space where the cylinder had once been. What? Susan looked at the ground rolling past below, then up at the trio carrying her. The three-winged bipedal cats were like nothing she had ever seen before, but the female one saw her staring and winked at her before motioning to her belt. Looking at it, Susan relaxed at the sight of a familiar symbol, a circled X with the top quarter being a diamond with an S in it. They were allies. She was safe. Do you really think you can defy the will of doom? Victor growled as he reached into one of his pouches and pulled out a glowing green rock. Moving fast, Superman leapt away even as the pain caused by the kryptonite started to rack his body. Fool, I am Doom and I am always prepared. Squirrel avalanche. Squirrel what? Doom echoed in confusion as he turned round, only to find himself confronted with a veritable tidal wave of chittering fur heading towards him at high speed. Oh no. Whoa. Fred rumbled from the hole in the wall where he stood next to Rogue, her projected visor restraining the optic blasts that she had used to create said hole. I never want to be on the receiving end of that. Amidst the pile of fur, the moving form of Squirrel Girl could occasionally be seen punching the now limp form of Doom. Bro got by it once. Rogue admitted, glancing over to where Lance and Todd were helping a recovering Superman towards them. Ben met them and Todd relinquished his position to the rocky orange behemoth. Needed a new uniform. Where's Susan? Relax, Stretchy. Spider-Man said with a smile. The felines took her back to the plane. Sis is safe, we just need to get her out of there, then you can head back while I fly the plane back. You'll crash it. Reed protested. You managed to crash a simulator once, remember? Well. Johnny protested weakly. You crashed the simulator. Into a wall. Ben countered. I think I'd better fly the Quinjet back. Superman said with a slight smile. Aw man. Two voices said. Todd and Johnny looked at each other in shock, then they both started laughing. Where's Squirrel Girl? She said something about waiting for the last of her friends. Doom lay motionless in the crater that the repeated impacts had formed in the floor. Slowly cracking open one eye, he looked around to check that the most terrifying she-juggernaut that he had ever encountered had indeed gone. Click. Doom's head snapped round and his eyes widened in disbelief as he saw a squirrel with a camera running away, then he sagged back down, allowing the exhaustion and bruises he felt to drag him back into blissful unconsciousness. Lord Doom. Doom slowly opened his eyes to find a concerned Magneto looking down at him. Doom, do you need assistance? I shall recover. Doom groaned as he activated several systems in his armor. Rising, he limped across to his throne and slumped into its embrace. I guess this means that the deal is off, then. Magneto sighed as he examined the hole in the wall. Odd, this looks similar to Cyclops, but at the same time, it's different. It was done by the one called Rogue. Doom said as he reviewed the security footage at high speed, then he paused as an earlier sentence caught his attention. And the deal remains. You did bring me Susan, after all, thus completing your end of the bargain, therefore I shall complete mine as her loss was my responsibility, not yours. One of my old bases is 120 miles southeast of here, this tracker will lead you there. Thank you, Lord Doom. Victor nodded, then looked round at the piles of rubble. This will take some time to sort out. I can move the metallics to your courtyard if you want. Magneto offered and Doom nodded. A moment later, all the metal fragments rose and seemed to flow out of the hall. Your control is impressive. Thank you, Doom. Magneto said with a slight smile, then he paused. Out of interest, how much do you know about non-human cloning? An interesting question. Doom allowed. Perhaps you wish to negotiate another deal? The answer is a lot, and I am listening. I have some strands of hair taken from Supergirl. Magneto said. I wish to clone her to gain the services of a Kryptonian amongst my acolytes. Interesting. I also have need for a minion and maybe an heir. Doom mused. I wonder. It would be interesting to see if I can. You have my full attention. How may I help with this? Susan looked up as the top of the cylinder was pried off, then she accepted the hand. Paw. That was extended to her. As the being pulled her out, she looked round at the domed hall that she had been transported into. Where are we? The Hall of Doors. The being rumbled as on another platform Reed stepped through the stone slab behind her and wrapped her in a hug. I am Talon, this is my life mate Maggie and this is Claw. Nice to meet you. Susan said almost automatically as she watched the other two winged felines walk across to another platform and vanish through one of the stone slabs. Thank you for rescuing me. Any friend of Superman is a friend of ours. Talon said with a smile which didn't bear any of his teeth. What sort of X-Man would I be if I refused to help? You're an X-Man. Susan said in shock. But all three of you look very similar. I thought physical mutations tended to be unique. We are mutates, not mutants. Talon corrected gently. It's a long story. Chapter 31, Aftermath. Thor, Steve, Kara. Xavier said in greeting to the trio entering his office. You missed all of the excitement. We heard. Steve said as he placed a container of blue, glowing liquid on Xavier's desk. Xavier looked at it curiously. This is all that we could salvage from the wreckage. Steve said in explanation. There is enough here to counter the kryptonite in one of the sleeping Kryptonians. Lady EIR had managed to create enough for all of them, but Scourge destroyed most of it, as well as the equipment to make it, the ingredients for it and the notes she made. Lady EIR says that due to the scarcity of some of the ingredients, she will not be able to make more for quite some time. Because some of the things have to be grown and harvested, it could take a couple of years. But at least we can awaken another of the sleepers. Xavier said with a slight smile. Kara, you know them best, which one would be the most advantageous to awaken? Karsta Worrell. Kara answered almost instantly. She's startlingly intelligent and had just received her medical certification with perfect grades when Krypton exploded. She's a pacifist, but she'll want to help finding another way to revive all of the others. One of Reed Richards' newest projects is the negation of the effects of kryptonite. Xavier noted. Perhaps Karsta could work alongside him on it. The Fantastic Four getting their own Kryptonian reinforcement. Steve smiled. Has my vote, they're good people. If thou dost wish, I shall relay to Healer EIR thine decision, that she may aid thee in reviving said damsel. Thor offered and Xavier nodded. Sounds like a plan. Steve grinned. But not today. Xavier said, earning several looks. Today is a day for recovering and celebrating our victory. Way to go, Beefcake Man. Doreen squeaked as Mystique stared wide-eyed at the ring in the box being proffered by a kneeling Clark Kent. Please let me be a bridesmaid, I've always wanted to be a bridesmaid. Mystique remained motionless for a long moment, then she hurled herself forwards, wrapping Clark in the tightest hug that she could manage. I take it that's a yes. Alex laughed from where he was leaning against the wall. Have you decided who's going to be your best man yet? Dibs on being the ring bearer. Chris called from where he and Laura were sat on the sofa with Laura helping Chris compose the essay he had been given as homework. Where did you learn about that? Clark asked, slightly distracted, and Chris shrugged. Well, since we live here, I started learning all I could about humans' customs. Some of them are really strange. Humans are really strange. Talon laughed from the chair in the corner where he was lounging with Maggie curled up in his lap. And as one who used to be one, I should know. Clark. I need you to, actually, it can wait. Xavier said from the doorway. Hey, does this mean Rogue will still be my auntie? Chris asked and Mystique blinked. Oh my. She was my daughter for a while, and she might become my sister-in-law. Sounds like a bit of a mind screw to me. Alex chortled. I wonder how complex your family tree will get? Glad mine isn't like that. Both Clark and Mystique glared at him. So this is Stark Tower. Scott said admiringly as he looked out of the apartment, taking in the view of Manhattan. Amazing, isn't it? Especially since Kara got some of Clark's tech and let me tinker with it during the installation. Tony Stark said as he strolled over, a glass in his hand and a beautiful woman on his arm. Pepper, meet Cyclops, and Ms. Marvel, otherwise known as Scott and Jean. Guys, this is Pepper, my assistant, keeper and the one who knows what I'm doing even when I have no clue myself. Pepper blushed slightly as Tony finished his introduction, then Tony grinned and almost seemed to teleport across the room, scooping up the young boy that had just entered. And this little man is Harry, he was adopted by Natasha and is my favorite little nephew. When we're away, his Aunt Pepper looks after him and he's real fun, although he did cost us a couch. Quite funny, really what he did. Turned it into ducks, of all things. Go on, show them how it's done. Duckifers! Harry shouted, and both Scott and Jean ducked as the couch in the corner suddenly erupted into a flock of ducks. Tony, you stop getting him to do that. Pepper scolded as she lifted the laughing boy from Tony's arms. Jarvis, open the windows and inform the others that we have a code Daffy. Again. Of course, ma'am. A smooth voice said as a transparent image of a butler appeared and bowed. Tony smirked. See? I told you that fitting the whole tower with image projectors was a neat idea. Arg. My leg. Scott couldn't help but laugh as Tony hopped around the room, trying to dislodge the duck that had attached itself to his trousers. Ducks again? Steve asked in a resigned tone from the door. Get it off my leg. The windows opened, and within a minute, aided by judicious use of Shinnick powers, the ducks were headed for the horizon. You've got feathers all over you. Pepper smiled at the boy in her arms. I think you need a bath. Harry froze, then tried to glare at her. That is an adorable pout he has. Jean laughed. Mom, Dad, it's time you learned the truth. Amanda's parents gave their daughter a quizzical look as she continued to speak. Kurt is a mutant who can teleport. He has limited range, only a couple of miles with the boosting belt that Clark and Forge made for him, and he can only teleport to places he knows. Did the recent attack on the White House have anything to do with this? Amanda's dad asked, and both teens nodded. I do not look human without main vatch. Kurt said slowly. Amanda does not mind. You kidding? You're a total cutie. Amanda said, then she realized that she had just said it in front of her parents and blushed. J.A., your personal plushie. Kurt teased, and her blush increased before she playfully slapped him on his shoulder. Kurt was at the White House, teleporting the shapeshifter, pretending to be the president around in order to keep Magneto distracted. Wait, the teleporter looked, totally, what? Kurt lowered his hand from his watch and looked up, his yellow eyes wary even as Amanda hugged him. Mom, Dad, this is Kurt Wagner, also known as Nightcrawler of the X-Men. Amanda said with a wide smile. A real hero and my boyfriend. For a long moment, no one moved, then Amanda's father stepped forwards and extended his hand. It's an honor to finally meet the real you. Thank you. So, how many times have you snuck into my daughter's bedroom? Kurt's shocked. I've old never do that. Was almost drowned out by Amanda's highly embarrassed cry of "Dayaad." Check me out. Chris said as he entered the room. Clark looked at his adopted son and his eyebrows lifted slightly. Interesting outfit. Yeah. Chris grinned as he looked down at himself. Trainer-style shoes, sleeveless bodysuit with our family symbol on, and this cool leather effect jacket that Alex suggested. Check out the back. Chris turned to show the large red-on-yellow S&A diamond that took up half of the back of the jacket. I'm too small to do the cape look without it looking silly, so Alex suggested this instead. He grinned over his shoulder. It even has inner pockets to store stuff I might need. Looks good. Clark admitted, then his gaze sharpened. But you're not old enough to join the X-Men yet. Nah, I'm joining Generation X. Chris said with another grin, then he sobered. Everyone knows that I'm Superboy, so I may as well start acting as the hero everyone thinks I am. This way, when I get my full powers, I'll be totally ready to join the X-Men and fight alongside Scott and Laura. Clark nodded again. I see you have it planned out. Have you shown Martha yet? Chris' eyes widened, then he spun round and sprinted out of the library. I shall guard him. Laura said from the doorway where she had been watching before she vanished as well. They grow up so fast, don't they? Mystique giggled, earning a mock glare from Clark. Oh, I was talking to Susan and she and Reed are also tying the knot soon. Maybe we could use the Institute's grounds to hold all the guests and make it a double. Karsta. The Argosian medic slowly opened her eyes and managed to focus on the person standing beside her. ## Kara? What's going on? Weren't we supposed to be entering stasis? ##. We were and we did ## Kara replied soothingly. ## My friend Jean is ready to help you learn the local language. Once we have you taught and dressed, I'll explain everything ##. The third Kryptonian. Xavier said with a proud smile from the other side of the viewport. Hopefully, she'll be able to help us revive the others sooner. I'm curious about how that cloning thing of Magneto's works. Clark mused. Perhaps, if we can debug it, we can use it in the Q&A samples to create a new generation of Kryptonians here on Earth. The two men turned to leave even as Kara hit the control that opaqued the window. And our main story tonight, the President has released a statement condemning the actions of the terrorist Eric Lenshair, also known as Magneto, and praising the team of mutants and superheroes who banded together to oppose him. In the handwritten statement, the President confirmed that all mutants are human and as such should not be discriminated against. In addition, any non-human sentient willing to live by the laws of the land will be regarded as being fully equal to human, with all the rights, responsibilities, and prerogatives that go with it. The screen switched off and Graydon snarled at it. This changes nothing. Soon we will show to the world the danger that mutants bring and we shall wipe them out. Behind him, Bolivar Trask nodded, then he glanced down at his day top hat. Before he tapped the control to close the window, the contents were briefly visible. Results of investigation into family of Graydon Creed. Mother Raven Darkholm, Mystique. Father Victor Creed, Sabretooth. Brother, half, Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler. Mother, Mystique. Notes did not inherit the X gene. I agree, sir. He said calmly. Mutants are to be destroyed. Wherever they may hide. He would wait. For now, Creed was useful, but his days were numbered. Trask would finish the task and wipe out all the mutants and their spawn. Wherever they might hide. Check the description for the links to the author.